The challenge every Sunday of Advent is how rich the readings are, because we could sit here all day and unpack them, which I can't because I have Christmas masses later. But today's, for example, if you look at them, they're just shouting this message that Jesus is the promised heir of David that the Jews have been waiting for. And this probably comes through most obviously in the way that Gabriel is borrowing linguistically, extensively, from the language that the prophet is using in the covenant that God is making with David. So, for example, in Samuel, God says that David's heir will be a son to him. And Gabriel says that Mary's son will be called Son of the Most High. God tells David, your house and your kingdom shall endure forever. Gabriel says that Jesus will receive the throne of David, his father, and of his kingdom there will be no end. And so it goes back and forth. And you can feel the text urging us on this fourth Sunday of Advent to ponder what exactly God is promising humanity through David and how we are to receive that in and through the person of Jesus Christ. But, on the other hand, we are Annunciation Parish, and this is the Annunciation scene. And so, for myself, when I was sitting in the chapel praying with these texts, there was this whole other narrative that was starting to bubble up to the surface. You'll notice, for example, that the context of this covenant that God makes with David is of great significance. It says, when King David was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from his enemies on every side, then, So we can tell then, for David, he's in a period of consolation, right? The language suggests that there's a tranquility of his soul, as there is a quietness about him because the kingdom is at rest, so there is a peace within him. And it's in this space that the Lord speaks to David through the prophet Nathan. When it comes to Our Lady's Annunciation, admittedly, it doesn't say much about the context of when it happened. But what we do know from Luke's gospel is that Our Lady had this habit of keeping a chamber of solitude for God in her heart. So she maintained in all times and situations a stillness wherein she would ponder him and his behaviors. So it's in this space that God speaks through the angel, and she hears him. That theme, you start to notice, begins to permeate the whole Christmas story. The shepherds hear the angels in the fields in the quiet of the night. God speaks to Joseph and to the Magi in a dream while they're at rest. The infant Christ's first cry is heard on what we sing, the silent night. And so, that should give us pause, because what happens this time of year? We run ourselves ragged. When we're running around from shopping to pageants to decorating to cooking to finding colorful outfits and flipping between one outrageous news article to the next, how are we going to hear a God who mainly speaks in silence? The answer is we probably won't. Consider the other people in the Christmas story who don't hear his voice. Herod, because he's anxious to protect his throne. The chief priests and the scribes, because they're busy trying to appease the king. The people of Jerusalem, who are more focused on protecting their way of life than listening to what God is saying. Now, whenever I read these accounts in the Gospels, honestly, I don't typically associate myself with these people. But as I was sitting in the chapel, the Lord was showing me that we have a lot more in common than I would be eager to admit. I mean, just this past week, between prepping the liturgies for Christmas and arranging for Father Murray's funeral with all the bishops and the priests that were coming, attending the Christmas events at our school, and then fielding the concerns about our Holy Father's new statement, I could feel myself just exiled from that silent chamber of my heart. And somewhere along the week, I literally stopped in my tracks and I realized I was no longer hearing God speaking. Admittedly, it's probably one of the greatest challenges of this time of year for any disciple. And so I think these readings for us honestly couldn't be more timely. In a few short hours, Jesus is going to be here. And I am sure, undoubtedly, for everybody here, there's a lot to be done between now and then. But what the Word of God is urging us to do is to remember, of all the things that we could be doing, one thing exceeds them all: to prepare the chamber of our hearts, to use our time wisely by engaging God in the silence, so that when he comes and when he speaks, there we will be to listen.